In this video, I do a comprehensive set of scientific tests on the Amazfit GTS 2 Mini. First, I test the quality of the sleep tracking against a scientific EEG monitor. Second, I'll check the heart rate accuracy. Third, I'll take a look at the SpO2 measurements. And finally, I'll do a step counting test. As always, I do not want to waste your time, so timestamps are in the description below and also on the timeline. Hello everyone. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. Now, before getting to the test, I'd like to provide the most important background information on the GTS 2 Mini in roughly 30 seconds. The GTS 2 Mini has 14 days of battery life with typical usage, has built-in GPS, is water resistant up to 5 atmospheres and has more than 70 sport modes. It has a 1.55-inch AMOLED display and this display has an always-on mode. It also has heart rate monitoring, sleep tracking and an oxygen saturation sensor. Now be aware that the heart rate monitor does not work while swimming. The sleep tracking feature can also track daytime naps as long as they're longer than 20 minutes. It also has stress tracking and Alexa built in. The GTS 2 Mini is relatively cheap compared to other smartwatches and I bought it for around 80 euros. However, my channel is not so much about listing features. Instead, on my channel, I try to test the accuracy of different measurements. Over the last few months, many people have requested I test more Amazfit devices. Today, I'll review the GTS 2 Mini, and in a few weeks, I'll release a review of the more rugged Amazfit T-Rex Pro. In the video today, I'll do a set of scientific tests, and since I'm in a unique position to test the accuracy of the sleep tracking algorithm, I want to start off with the sleep test. For the sleep comparison, I wore the GTS 2 Mini to bed for 3 nights. And at the same time, I also wore this portable scientific EEG device and I recorded myself using an infrared camera. The EEG device can actually measure your brainwaves and muscle movement and is therefore ideal for measuring your sleep stages. I manually went through the recording of the EEG and scored each part of the night for the different sleep stages. I couldn't find a way to export the sleep data, so I ended up manually copying the data and loading it into the coding language I use. Now, to the results I obtained. Let's first have a look at the accuracy over the 3 individual nights, after which I'll do a statistical overview analysis. Here we see the first night I recorded. On top you can see the sleep stages as they were recorded using the EEG device. Along the horizontal axis we have the time of night, and as you can see I went to bed at around 12:30. On the vertical axis we have the different sleep stages, that being deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep and awake. The sleep stages are plotted in the same order that they're usually displayed in research. On the bottom you can see a similar plot, but now for the sleep stages as they were recorded by the GTS 2 Mini. If we first look at deep sleep according to the EEG, which are marked here in purple, we see a good overlap between the GTS 2 Mini and the EEG device. It detected both deep sleep segments quite accurately, so this is a good start. Looking at light sleep, marked here in pinkish, we see that most of what was light sleep was also detected as being light sleep. If it was confused, it seems to be mostly confused with deep sleep and REM sleep. Looking at REM sleep, which are marked here in red, this was detected okay-ish. Some of the REM sleep was detected correctly, but other parts were missed and also some extra REM sleep was detected throughout the night. To see the sleep cycles, I added non-REM sleep in blue and again marked REM sleep in red. Each sleep cycle starts with a combination of deep sleep and light sleep together called non-REM and always ends in REM. I would say that based on just the data from the GTS 2 Mini, I would not be able to see all of the sleep cycles. I would be able to see the first 2, but for the second half of the night this would be more difficult. Looking at awake time detection marked here in green, this was not very good. The GTS 2 Mini detected none of my awake moments and also detected an extra awake moment. So for this night, it does not appear to be sensitive enough. Detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up, marked here in yellow, was pretty good. It was almost spot on in detecting the moment I fell asleep and awoke. This is the second night I tracked. Looking at deep sleep, marked here in purple, we see that the deep sleep I had was indeed correctly detected, though some extra deep sleep was also detected throughout the night. The light sleep detection was less good for this night, with a lot of my light sleep being confused with the REM sleep and deep sleep. REM sleep detection marked here in red was also not that accurate for this night. The GTS 2 Mini detected a lot of extra REM sleep that was not really there. This also means that it would be difficult for me to see the sleep cycles based on just the data from the GTS 2 Mini. Awake detection was a bit better for this night. It detected the longer awakening I had, but it missed the 2 shorter awakenings. Again, detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up was really good, and it almost perfectly aligned with the data from the EEG device. Now this is the last night I want to share. Deep sleep detection was okay for this night. It detected the first segment of deep sleep, but it missed the second. It also detected some extra deep sleep. Light sleep detection was quite okay as well, with most of the light sleep correctly identified as light sleep. Again, REM sleep detection was a bit hit and miss. Some of the REM sleep was detected, but based on just the data from the GTS2 Mini, I would say it's difficult to see the actual sleep cycles. Awake detection was again not very sensitive, and it just picked up on the longest awakening but missed the 2 shorter ones. Additionally, it detected some extra short awakenings as well. Detecting the moment I fell asleep and woke up was again very accurate. So far, I have mixed feelings about the sleep tracking accuracy of the Amazfit GTS2 Mini. I would say it's good at detecting the real deep sleep and light sleep I had. It also appears to be accurate at detecting the moment I fell asleep and the moment I woke up. However, it does not appear to be very sensitive at detecting awake times, and the REM sleep detection seems to be the biggest issue of the device. To get an even more objective view of the results, let's calculate some statistics regarding the consistency between the sleep stages of the GTS2 Mini and the EEG device. However, first a quick side note. If you're interested in the latest updates on the wearables I'm testing, consider subscribing to my Instagram and my weekly newsletter. Of course, you would also make me really happy if you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Now enough self-promotion, let's see what the overview statistics say. First, let's look at the total percentage of each sleep stage the EEG device and the GTS2 Mini predicted. Here I displayed those percentages for the EEG device on the left and the GTS2 Mini on the right. Overall, these percentages agree okay-ish. The GTS2 Mini predicts roughly the correct amount of deep sleep and REM sleep. It does however predict too little awake time and too much deep sleep. However, as we already saw based on just the individual nights, the timing of these sleep stages is also vital. Therefore, more important than these total percentages is checking if the GTS2 Mini predicts the correct sleep stages at the right time, and that's what I displayed here. On top we have the sleep stages according to the EEG device, and on the left the sleep stages according to the GTS2 Mini. Now each column here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the actual sleep stages was recorded as each sleep stage by the GTS2 Mini. First, looking at deep sleep, we see that about 72% of what was deep sleep was also predicted as being deep sleep. The rest of the deep sleep was predicted as being light sleep and REM sleep by the GTS2 Mini. Light sleep was also predicted quite well. More than 75% of what was light sleep was also predicted as being light sleep by the GTS2 Mini. If light sleep was confused, it was mostly confused with REM sleep, but also a bit with deep sleep. Now we arrive at the sleep stage the GTS2 Mini struggles with most. Here we see it classified about 30% of what was REM sleep correctly. Most REM sleep was actually classified as light sleep by the GTS2 Mini. Awake time was also detected quite poorly. Only 37% of what was awake time was also detected as awake time by the GTS2 Mini. Most awake time was actually classified as light sleep. Finally, I want to check if the GTS2 Mini detected me going to bed and waking up at the right time. On the vertical axis we have the dates of the nights I tested the GTS2 Mini, and on the horizontal axis is the time difference between the EEG device and the GTS2 Mini for waking up in yellow and falling asleep in blue. So a positive number means it detected me as waking up or falling asleep later than in reality, and a negative number means it detected me as waking up or falling asleep earlier. As you can see, the GTS2 Mini mostly detects me waking up and falling asleep at the right time. The maximum deviation in any of these measurements was just 6 minutes. So for detecting the total time spent in bed, the GTS2 Mini appears to be quite good. Overall, the sleep tracking accuracy of the GTS2 Mini is okay. It was quite good at detecting when I had deep sleep and light sleep. However, it was not very good at detecting awake time or REM sleep, making it difficult to see my sleep cycles. So, how does this compare to some of the other sleep tracking devices I've tested so far? That is what is plotted here. On the top left we have the same plot we saw before, showing the performance of the GTS2 Mini. On the top right we have the results for the Whoop strap. On the bottom left the Fitbit Inspire 2, and on the bottom right the Mi Watch, which I recently reviewed. As you can see, the GTS2 Mini performs quite well for deep sleep and light sleep. However, its major issue compared to these other devices is tracking REM sleep and awake time. If we compare to the Fitbit Inspire 2 for instance, we see that all round the Inspire 2 performs better. For the next set of tests, let's take a look at the heart rate accuracy of the GTS2 Mini. To test the heart rate accuracy, I'll compare it to the Polar H10 ECG chest strap, which is generally considered to be one of the most accurate consumer devices available for heart rate measurements. I wore both the GTS2 Mini and the Polar H10 ECG chest strap for 7 spinning sessions, 11 bike rides and 7 weightlifting sessions. That way I can check my heart rate at different heart rate ranges. Let's start with the accuracy during spinning. Here I displayed an overview of the heart rate accuracy during spinning. Each dot here is a single heart rate measurement, with along the horizontal axis the value according to the Polar H10 ECG chest strap, and along the vertical axis the value according to the GTS2 Mini. The blue line indicates perfect agreement, so any measurement along this line had roughly the same value for the Polar H10 and the GTS2 Mini. The red line indicates those measurements where the value according to the GTS2 Mini is half of the actual value according to the Polar H10. The reason I added this line is because in the past I've seen that many devices measure half the actual heart rate when they make a mistake. The more measurements there are in a certain area, the darker black the color. As you can see, the GTS2 Mini did not perform great during spinning. Especially at a higher heart rate range, you can see there are many points near the red line, indicating that it detected about half the actual heart rate. Let's have a look at some of the individual training sessions to see where it makes these mistakes. Here you see the first spinning session. Along the horizontal axis we have the time, and my heart rate is along the vertical axis. In blue I plotted my heart rate according to the Polar H10 chest strap, and in red is my heart rate according to the GTS2 Mini. As you can see, I took 5 short breaks in this spinning session where my heart rate would dip. For this first spinning session, the performance of the GTS2 Mini shows some issues. For some of the segments, it missed picking up on my increase in heart rate. Instead, it kept detecting my lower heart rate that I had whilst taking a rest. Looking at this second spinning session, we see something similar, with it making a mistake for 3 out of the 5 segments. And this appears to be true for almost all training sessions, as you can also see here. And also for this final one here, where it basically was unable to detect any of my increases in heart rate, except for maybe here in this final segment. So far, this is not looking very good. Let's now take a look at cycling outside, which I recorded whilst commuting to and from work. If I cycle outside, there are many more bumps, and I also tend to sweat more in the sun, which might actually influence the accuracy of the GTS2 Mini. Let's take a look. Here we see an overview of those measurements, and the agreement is arguably even worse than before. Most points are below the blue line, indicating that in these moments the GTS2 Mini detected a too low heart rate. Let's take a look at some of the individual cycling sessions to see why this is. Here we see the first cycling session. Again, in blue is the Polar H10 ECG chest strap, and in red is the GTS2 Mini. As you can see, the watch really had some trouble accurately detecting my heart rate. For this second commute here we see the same, where it was basically unable to detect my heart rate accurately. The watch fails to accurately detect my heart rate, and often it even shows a dip in my heart rate when it's supposed to show an increase in my heart rate, as we can see for instance here, but also here. So this performance for cycling outside is even worse than the performance it had for cycling inside on my home trainer. Finally, let's see how the GTS2 Mini performed during weightlifting. Now, weightlifting is notoriously difficult for wrist-worn devices because during weightlifting I flex the muscles and tendons near my wrist, and this makes it hard for a watch to accurately detect the sudden changes in my heart rate. Let's take a look. This is the overview of my heart rate accuracy for weightlifting, similar to before. Of course, the average heart rate is much lower during weightlifting than during cardio workouts. You can see that there are more points along the blue line now, at least compared to what we saw before for cycling outside. Still, however, we can see there are a lot of points below the blue line. Let's take a look at some of the individual sessions to see why this is. Here we see an example weightlifting session. Again, in blue is my heart rate according to the chest strap, and in red is my heart rate according to the GTS2 Mini. Here you can see that the GTS2 Mini can pick up on the general patterns in my heart rate, however it fails to pick up on the increases in heart rate that accompany each set that I did. And we basically see the same for all training sessions. The GTS2 Mini follows my overall patterns in heart rate, but not the peaks in heart rate. Sometimes it can pick it up a little bit, but in most cases it really fails to pick up on the peaks in my heart rate. Overall, the performance of the GTS2 Mini when it comes to heart rate measurements is pretty bad. It was unable to pick up accurately on my heart rate during spinning, cycling and weightlifting. It's really one of the worst heart rate trackers I've tested so far. The only tracker which was about as bad or maybe even a bit worse was another tracker by Amazfit, the Amazfit GTR2, which I reviewed a while ago. To give you a better impression for how the Amazfit GTS2 Mini performed, let me show you how some other watches did when it comes to heart rate accuracy. Let's start off with the accuracy during spinning, and let's see how the GTS2 Mini compares to 2 Fitbit devices. First we have the Fitbit Inspire 2. So on the left here I plotted the results for the heart rate of the GTS2 Mini, and on the right the accuracy for the Fitbit Inspire 2, both during spinning. As you can see, a much larger percentage of the points is along the blue line for the Fitbit Inspire 2 compared to the GTS 2 Mini, which indicates that the Fitbit Inspire 2 is more accurate. If we look at the more recently released Fitbit Luxe, we see something similar. It's much more accurate than the GTS 2 Mini. For the Fitbit Luxe, almost all points are along the blue line, whereas for the GTS 2 Mini, most points in the higher heart rate range are actually closer to the red line than to the blue line. If we now look at weightlifting for the Inspire 2 on the right here and the GTS 2 Mini on the right, the contrast is not as stark between the two, but still the Inspire 2 performs better than the GTS 2 Mini. And we can see something similar for the Fitbit Luxe here. Though it's definitely not perfect with some points below the blue line, it's definitely better than the GTS 2 Mini during weightlifting. Next, let's compare the overall accuracy during all exercises of the Huawei Band 6 to the GTS 2 Mini. As you can see, the Huawei Band 6 on the right here performed much better than the GTS 2 Mini. The Huawei Band 6 shows a much smaller percentage of points below the blue line compared to the GTS 2 Mini. So if you care about heart rate accuracy and you want a relatively cheap smartwatch, I would recommend the Huawei Band 6 over the GTS 2 Mini for sure. As mentioned before, the Apple Watch is the best wrist-worn fitness tracker I've tested so far, which is what you can see in the plot here on the right. Almost all points are along the blue line, indicating a good accuracy for the Apple Watch. So I would without a doubt recommend the Apple Watch for heart rate tracking. That is, if you want to spend that amount of money and also if you of course own an iPhone. Finally, as I mentioned, the Amazfit GTR 2 is another Amazfit device that performed pretty poorly at heart rate tracking. As you can see in the right plot here, the GTR 2 performed even a bit worse than the GTS 2 Mini. However, I would say that both are bad enough to be more or less useless for heart rate tracking during exercise. As you saw, there are much better alternatives to the GTS 2 Mini out there if you're interested in tracking your heart rate. Next, let's take a look at SpO2 or oxygen saturation. In really simple terms, this is the percentage of red blood cells in the bloodstream that contain oxygen. This can be important to measure because it can be used as an indication for several medical conditions. For instance, it can be used to 1. Detect sleep apnea, where you can basically stop breathing for 30 seconds or more during sleep. 2. Keep track of lung diseases, and 3. Potentially detect respiratory infections such as COVID-19. In all these cases, your blood oxygen saturation can drop to anywhere from the low 90 to 60%. Normal ranges, on the other hand, are generally between 95 and 100%. Whenever possible, I try to test if an SpO2 monitor like the one in the GTS 2 Mini can detect a low oxygen saturation. The way I can get a consistently low SpO2 value is by measuring it in flight. Now, whilst flying, the air pressure in the cabin drops, thereby leading to a lower concentration of oxygen, which leads to a lower SpO2 level in my blood. However, ever since I've owned the GTS 2 Mini, I've not taken any flights. So instead, I tested if the GTS 2 Mini detected a low oxygen saturation when it's not supposed to, by measuring my SpO2 in the morning and evening at ground level. In total, I took 41 measurements. At the same time, I also took a measurement with a dedicated SpO2 monitor. Let's take a look at those results. First, let's look at the average and spread of values for the Amazfit GTS Mini on the left and the finger pulse oximeter on the right. Now each dot here is a single measurement, and as you can see, the spread of values is much larger for the Amazfit GTS Mini than for the finger pulse oximeter, though the average value is roughly the same, a little under 98% for the Amazfit GTS 2 Mini and a little over 98% for the finger pulse oximeter. Now, as the dots indicate, the finger pulse oximeter is always roughly between 97 and 100%, whereas the values for the Amazfit GTS 2 Mini drop to much lower values, and I even left out the most extremely low value from this plot here. Next, if we look at the association between the values measured by the finger pulse oximeter and the GTS 2 Mini, we see no clear correlation. On the horizontal axis in this plot are the values for the GTS 2 Mini, which are always between 87 and 100%, whereas the range for the finger pulse oximeter, as we saw before, is much tighter, roughly between 97 and 100%. If we actually plot the correlation with this line here, we even find a significant negative correlation, meaning that an increase in the values for the GTS 2 Mini is associated with a decrease in values according to the finger pulse oximeter. Just to clarify that the range of values according to the finger pulse oximeter is much narrower than that of the GTS 2 Mini, here I put both axes on the same scale, and as you can see, there's a much narrower spread of points for the finger pulse oximeter than for the Amazfit GTS 2 Mini. I have to admit, it's difficult to make a final judgment of the GTS 2 Mini's SpO2 accuracy since I could not test it in a low oxygen environment. What I can say is the watch sometimes detects a lower oxygen saturation when it's not supposed to, though most of the time it is in the expected range. The GTS2 Mini also features a step counter. To see if this counts my steps accurately, I went out and took exactly 4,000 steps in segments of 1,000 steps. Now to get an accurate step count, I manually counted my steps using this tally counter. Let's take a look at those results. As I mentioned, for the step counting test, I went out and I took 4 times exactly 1,000 steps. I wore the GTS2 Mini on my left arm and I alternated holding the tally counter in my left and right hand for each set of 1,000 steps, which is what the right and left labels refer to here. Now these are the actual steps counted by the GTS2 Mini when I was wearing it on my left arm, and as you can see they were really close to the actual 1,000 steps I took for each of the 4 segments, and it was never more than 25 steps off. And this first segment here, where it was 25 steps off, included me walking down some stairs, which might have made it more difficult for it to count the steps accurately. Just to put that into perspective, here are the steps counted by the Garmin Venue 2 I wore at the same time. As you can see, they generally performed about equally well, and the GTS2 Mini might have performed even slightly better than the Garmin Venue 2. Overall though, both performed very well. Overall, I'm not that satisfied with the Amazfit GTS2 Mini. One of the most important and basic functionalities of a smartwatch is to measure your heart rate, and this is where the Amazfit GTS2 Mini fails quite badly. Together with the Amazfit GTR2, which I tested in the past, it takes the crown of the worst heart rate tracker I've tested so far. And honestly, I would have loved for it to work well. The design and screen of the GTS2 Mini are so beautiful. The Amazfit GTS and GTR series smartwatches are amongst the most beautiful smartwatches I've seen, and they're also very reasonably priced. The other measurements were okay. The sleep tracking was not terrible, but again you can get better smartwatches for the same price. The SpO2 tracking seems to be decent, but I still have to check it in a low oxygen environment. Finally, the step counting seems to be pretty good. So, should you buy the GTS2 Mini? Well, if you don't care about the biometric measurements but just want the smartwatch features, it's a really beautiful watch. However, if you want to use the heart rate and sleep tracking functions, there are better watches out there for a similar price. If you want a relatively cheap but still beautiful full-fledged smartwatch, I would recommend the Mi Watch. If you want a wrist-worn wearable that tracks your heart rate and SpO2 accurately under most circumstances, then you should get an Apple Watch. If you want the best sleep tracking from a watch, get a Fitbit device, like the Fitbit Luxe, Fitbit Sense or Fitbit Inspire 2. The Withings sleep analyzer, which you put under your mattress, also performs reasonably well. The Whoop strap has good heart rate tracking and good sleep tracking. However, this is a subscription service, so can be much more expensive. Finally, I should mention some of the limitations of the data that I showed here. First of all, I just tested the watch for a limited number of days and just on me, and it will be interesting to see how it performs on others. To do a full sleep comparison, it would be good to also test the watch against the full scientific polysomnography setup. In my videos, I do scientific tests on different devices like the Oura Ring, the Fitbit and the ScanWatch, and in the end, I hope to use tracking to improve my life. So if you like that subject and like this video, consider subscribing to my channel and also consider giving it a thumbs up because it makes it easier for other people to find my videos. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more content like this, consider subscribing to my channel and also watch some of my other videos.